This photograph of 3 children looks innocent until experts uncover a hidden truth. The antique shop in Charleston smelled of old wood and mothballs. Marcus Williams had been browsing estate sale items for more than an hour when he noticed a small daguerreotype in a tarnished silver frame, partly hidden behind a stack of depression glass. As a researcher for the Equal Justice Initiative documenting the legacy of slavery in America, Marcus had trained himself to look for images that revealed stories beyond what appeared on the surface. This photograph stopped him cold. 3 children, likely between 8 and 10 years old, sat together on an ornate garden bench. 2 white children, a boy and a girl with blonde ringlets, sat on either side of a black child in the center. All 3 were dressed in expensive clothing. The white boy wore a tailored suit with a bow tie. The girl wore an elaborate dress trimmed with lace. The black child was dressed just as finely, wearing a pressed white shirt, dark vest, and trousers similar to the white boy. All 3 children were smiling, real smiles, not the stiff expressions common in 1850s photography. Their bodies were close, relaxed with one another. The white girl rested her hand on the black child's shoulder. The white boy leaned in slightly, as if they had been laughing moments before the photograph was taken. At first glance, the image appeared to show a tender childhood friendship crossing racial boundaries in antebellum South Carolina. It looked like proof that children of that era may have seen beyond the prejudice of their parents. But Marcus had learned never to trust appearances. He lifted the frame and examined it closely under the shop's dim lighting. The photograph was dated on the back in faded ink, Summer 1854, Charleston. A photographer's stamp read, Whitmore Studios. Marcus studied each child's face carefully. The white children looked relaxed and happy, but the black child's smile did not fully reach his eyes. Something else was there, something hard to define, perhaps fear or exhaustion, hidden behind a practiced expression of happiness. Then Marcus noticed it. The black child's sleeves had slipped slightly up his arms. Around each wrist, barely visible in the sepia tones, were discolored bands of skin. Marcus had seen markings like this before in other historical photographs and documents. They were unmistakable signs of shackles worn over long periods. Marcus's hands began to shake. This was not a photograph of 3 children playing together as equals. It was something far darker, a carefully staged image meant to document horror while presenting an illusion of kindness and harmony. He bought the photograph for $30 and walked straight to his car. Sitting in the parking lot, Marcus examined it again under better light, using his phone to zoom in. The wrist marks were clear. As he looked closer, more details stood out. The black child sat slightly forward on the bench, as if ready to stand at any moment. His posture, despite the smile, showed submission. His clothing, though expensive, looked slightly oversized, possibly handed down or purchased without care. This child was enslaved, Marcus felt certain, dressed in fine clothes and posed with his enslavers' children as if he were their equal, yet marked by chains that revealed his true status. Marcus needed to know who these children were, what had happened to them, and why this photograph had been staged. He drove back to his office in Montgomery, Alabama, already planning the research that would take over the coming months of his life. At the Equal Justice Initiative's research center, Marcus placed the daguerreotype under high-intensity lights and photographed it from every angle. The digital images revealed details not visible before. The marks on the black child's wrists were even clearer, bands of lighter skin about an inch wide, with subtle scarring at the edges. Marcus had documented similar injuries many times. Enslaved children who were shackled, whether as punishment, to prevent escape, or as a show of power, often developed these marks. The skin lightened where metal pressed constantly, and scar tissue formed where shackles rubbed during movement. Marcus began with the photographer's mark. Whitmore Studios, Charleston, 1854. Historical directories showed that Edward Whitmore operated a successful photography studio in Charleston from 1851 to 1863, serving wealthy families who could afford the costly daguerreotype process. Whitmore advertised family portraits and children's images captured with care and refinement. Marcus located dozens of Whitmore's photographs in museums and archives. The photographer had a clear style, outdoor settings when possible, natural poses, careful attention to clothing, and backgrounds meant to show wealth. Many portraits included enslaved people placed in the background to signal prosperity. But this photograph was different. The enslaved child was not in the background. He was placed at the center, seated between the white children and dressed just as finely. This image was not meant to show wealth through servants. It was meant to suggest something else entirely. Marcus contacted colleagues at the Charleston Museum and the South Carolina Historical Society, sending high-resolution images. Within days, he received a reply from Dr. Patricia Green, a historian specializing in antebellum Charleston families. "I believe I have identified the white children," her email began. The clothing style and Whitmore studio connection pointed her to prominent Charleston families from 1854. She found a matching photograph of the Hartwell family, Colonel James Hartwell, his wife Eleanor, and their 2 children, William and Charlotte. The children in Marcus's photograph matched William and Charlotte exact. Lie. Marcus recognized the name immediately. Colonel James Hartwell was one of Charleston's wealthiest plantation owners, controlling over 2,000 acres and enslaving 187 people according to the 1850 census. Patricia's email continued. She found a reference to the photograph in Eleanor Hartwell's diary, donated to the archives in the 1920s. Eleanor wrote about hiring Whitmore to photograph the children at play with their little companion. She never named the black child, referring to him only as being constantly with them, and noting that William and Charlotte were fond of the boy. Marcus felt unsettled by how casually Eleanor described the situation, as if it were normal for enslaved children to play with white children while wearing shackles. He requested copies of Eleanor Hartwell's full diary. When the scanned pages arrived, Marcus spent days reading entries from 1852 to 1856. Eleanor wrote often about her children but referred to the boy dozens of times without ever using his name. He was always the boy or their little companion. He was present, yet invisible. Marcus compiled every reference. In March 1853, Eleanor wrote that William had grown attached to the boy from the quarters, and that he was well-behaved and clean. In July 1853, she allowed him to sit in on Charlotte's lessons, but noted he could not learn to read, as it was illegal and dangerous. In December 1853, Eleanor wrote that the boy had tried to run away. James was disappointed and had him punished and fitted with restraints. She explained to her children that discipline was necessary for the boy's own good. Marcus felt sick reading this. The restraints mentioned were the shackles visible in the photograph, taken 6 months later. In January 1854, Eleanor wrote that the boy had adjusted to his restraints and returned to his cheerful behavior. She described explaining to her children that different rules applied to different people. Marcus clenched his fists. The psychological manipulation was staggering, teaching the enslaved child that chains were care and teaching white children that bondage was natural. Marcus searched Hartwell plantation records and found the boy's name, Samuel. A ledger listed him as approximately 9 years old, assigned as children's companion. His mother Rose had died in 1852. A note labeled him a flight risk and recorded restraints applied in December 1853. Samuel had been 8 years old when he was whipped and shackled. Records showed the restraints remained for at least 18 months. During that Samuel continued serving William and Charlotte. The photograph was taken 6 months after his escape attempt. In 1856, records noted Samuel becoming unsuitable for house service and recommended reassignment to fieldwork. Soon after, Samuel was sold to a Mississippi plantation for $650. He was 11 years old. Marcus traced William and Charlotte's lives easily. They lived long, respected lives. Samuel vanished from the records, but the story did not end there. 3 days after the exhibition opened, Marcus received an email from a woman in Mississippi. Her name was Grace Morrison. She believed she was descended from Samuel. Her family had preserved his story for generations. Samuel survived slavery, lived to old age, and insisted his scars be visible in photographs. He wanted proof to remain. Grace explained that Samuel said the worst part was not the violence, but being forced to pretend happiness. He said it erased his humanity. Marcus wept. Samuel survived. He had children, descendants, memory. The photograph meant to hide the truth had revealed it. And Samuel Rose was no longer erased.